Welcome to Slow Down to Speed Up. I'm Brian Wang, an executive coach who helps startup founders grow by working through their biggest challenges. On this show, I sit down with founders for a one-time coaching session where you will hear things my guests never say elsewhere because they're working through real-life, current leadership issues. When we struggle, we're often tempted to find a quick solution, and sometimes that's all we need. But when we're finding ourselves stuck in those really tricky, recurring problems, that's when it's time to slow down. Because breaking through to the next level requires us to examine what patterns may be holding us back and what new perspective might be called for. I ask everyone who comes here to dig deep and trust that through this work, they will discover something new about themselves and how to move forward with their business. I hope you find something valuable in what you hear today for your own journey. Andy Mauro is a serial entrepreneur. He sold his last company in 2021, and he's back in the saddle with his new company, Storycraft. What brings him to the session today is the challenge of balancing a huge vision with proper risk management. As with any startup, it's hard to have a big impact if you ignore the risks that might kill you. Our discussion of risk leads us to finding what's personally scary for Andy. Once we dive into his individual fears, we start to see how they might be a bottleneck for building the audience he hopes to create. Hey, Andy, it's great to see you, man.
Hey, Brian.
So, for those who are listening, I want to provide a little bit of context. You and I have known each other for some time now. We worked together in a coaching relationship for a while, and It's been some time now since our last conversation. But I thought I'd ask you to just spend a couple of moments to introduce yourself, give us your background, and just what's bringing you into the conversation today.
Sure. Well, it's nice to get reconnected. My background is, I guess now I get to say I'm a serial entrepreneur, or at least a two-time entrepreneur. So my background is, I always tell people I've been working on computers you talk to for like 22 years, proof in the gray beard now. I did a big stint at Nuance and built some cool products over there with people, voice assistants and that kind of thing, and then ended up leading a AI innovation group there, which was fun. But ultimately I realized, we weren't going to ship stuff, and I really wanted to sort of have a bigger impact. And so I founded a company with a ton of support and amazing mentors and friends and believers and supporters, and was able to start a company called Automat back in 2016 during this sort of, it's almost like the fake bot craze. Like if now is like the new actually working stuff when, everyone was wrong, Facebook, Google, Apple, us, everyone. But we had some success. We built a pretty good product. We had pretty good retention, really great team. And I was able to sell that company in 2021. And then that was sort of a conversational commerce product, product recommendations and that kind of thing. And then I sort of completely lost the plot. And as I was looking at all this LLM, amazing, like really working functional AI stuff that was coming out, I said, this looks like an entertainment product. As you and I have talked about, like games have been a colossal part of my life. Sort of stories, technology, and games have been sort of like the three things that I've cared about most outside of people. And I was like, okay, it's time to actually do something. I met this incredible co-founder who had a little bit of history and background in games, and we thought, we'll never be able to raise money for this. Like, we have no background, no credibility, right? And then we raised money in like 2 weeks, which was a really amazing, fortuitous thing with, again, amazing, incredible supporters and people like that. And so now we're off to the races with a game company whose purpose is to, make it easy for anyone to act out personalized stories with their friends, so it's AI and there's UGC elements making stuff. But, probably I said to my wife yesterday, I think I'm having the most fun I ever had at work. And so that's incredible. Also something I'm kind of aware of, which is pretty cool. So having a blast, ups and downs. Right now is pretty up, so.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So we're catching you on a good day.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm here just to answer that part of the question. Because to do a session with you again is like a real fortuitous thing. I'm really looking forward to it. I got a tremendous amount of value out of working with you over the years in my last company. And the other part of it is, like, as you know, like coaching has been an incredibly important part of my life, both being coached, like, so as we were talking about before, like I cared about coaching so much, I went and got trained as a coach because it was so valuable to me. I was like, I want to know some of these things. And so, as I perceive what you're doing here is you're trying to open a door to people to see what the coaching experience is like. And I just believe so strongly that this would be so good for so many people, never mind entrepreneurs, but definitely entrepreneurs, that I want to, as scared as I am about doing a coaching session live on the internet, or at least, published on the internet,
Yeah.
I want to live my values, and I believe it so strongly that I'm here to sort of share, and hopefully this will convince someone to go get coached or become a coach or both, so.
All right, great. Now that we're past the advertising part of the portion of the conversation,
Yeah.
it's my understanding that you're also walking into today with a particular thing in mind, right?
Yeah,
You've
definitely.
stood up the company. You've been working on it for some time now, and things are going well. But tell me a little bit more about, what's the context that you're bringing in, and what are we really working on here?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we're sort of 6 months in, 3 months from raising money and building the team. And I think one of the things that I learned from last company to this company, I think about myself and about the way that I build, and is that good or bad, I'm sort of an inventory guy, which means there's some entrepreneurs that, and I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. I think you just do it the way you do it. And I think some people are very naturally tuned to see a thing that already exists in a really obvious market and go, I know how to make that better. And, sort of product market fit is kind of already there. And you just go innovate. And I'm not saying that's easier or harder. I think every path has its challenges and all that stuff. But for me, I think one of the things that I've learned is that I'm more, the word I think about is sort of inventory. Like I tend to be inspired by a vision of the future that I see.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with actually being empathetic about people and trying to solve problems. But a game company is a little different. Like it's a little more resilient to the idea of like problem solution and all that kind of stuff. And so with that idea, one of the conclusions I think I've reached is that, and this is old wisdom too, it's as hard to do a small idea as it is to do a colossally big idea. And I think if you're going to be kind of inventory, I think actually your chance of success actually is correlated with the size of your vision. I think like the level, like I think people can get on board with a much bigger idea. I think it captures more awareness. I think it probably has the ability to impact more people for good. And so I'm really trying with this company to think as big as we possibly can.
Yeah.
And we can get into what that means if that's important to the conversation, but I'll just leave that. We have a very big concept of what we think this could mean in terms of why people would want it. I'm also able to build for myself this time around, which is really, really nice, And then the second part is the impact that it would have. And this sounds, I hear to other people listening, to me, this sounds crazy, but this is part of the game, is like the impact that it would have in the world. Okay, it's an AI UGC video game company. How's that going to impact the world? Well, I can tell you, I think, right? And so we're thinking really big.
Right.
I think with the last company, one of the mistakes I made is I don't think we thought big enough. And then I think we tried to de-risk all over the place. And so I did a ton of customer discovery. We talked to a ton of customers. You may remember, like, we signed a very big deal in the first year. And I actually think, looking back on that, we thought small and we de-risked high, at least to a certain degree. Like, we got deals, and what happened was is the signal was wrong. Like, we signed this big beauty company customer, and actually they didn't care about the problem we were solving for them. They actually just wanted to work with a startup and have an open innovation thing and be able to trot us out on stage. And they were hopeful and optimistic that
but there was a misalignment in terms of the incentives and motivations.
Exactly. And so if I think about that, dream small, de-risk big, that's definitely not the right formula.
Doesn't leave a lot of room for upside or value creation, right?
Right. And so I think we're thinking quite expansively here, but I think one of the things that I am aware of is maybe I'm not de-risking enough. Like, I'm not taking control of the things that I could do. And so I don't want to be delusional, right? I think that's one of the things that is possible when you start to dream as big as we're starting to dream. Yeah. And so I also think it's worth saying that I haven't done a consumer company before. And so I do think there's probably some areas that I'm kind of avoiding, not intentionally, not out of fear, but probably more just out of like not seeing them. Yeah. And so if I was to put it into one sentence, sort of what I'm thinking about here is like, how do I continue to dream as expansively as I think we are having fun dreaming about our ambition and the impact it could have for people, right? While also sort of being responsible with the amount of risk mitigation and things that we do in that front, with this
Yeah.
awareness that I don't want to fall into that old trap that I fell into before. I mean, is that clear?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So what came up for me was there almost some sense of like a pendulum swing. So, with Automat, it seems like the story was we de-risked too much, we thought too small, and now it's like with the current company, we're really going for it. And this question is coming up. It's like, are we taking on too much risk? Part of what I hear is like, how do we, the way you framed it is like, how do we really go for something massive while also kind of responsibly mitigating risk? So in that, correct me if I'm wrong, but in that I'm hearing a concern that we're like, maybe we're not tending to the risk enough, in this approach. Is that?
I think that there's a feeling that could be the case. I think exploring whether I actually feel that way or I'm just worried, right? I mean, I think the other part, like, new company is called Storycraft, and the idea here too is like with games, I think there's like consumer and games especially. It's like there's some magic elixir also that comes into it, and so like the level of risk mitigation that I tell myself you can actually do, at least in the normal kind of, go talk to customers and they'll tell you what if they have this problem. It's not how it works, right? And so I think between games, consumer, and sort of my evolved attitude around, the pros and cons of de-risking, I'm a little uncertain. Yeah, exactly. Like, am I not de-risking the things I could be de-risking? Am I even aware of the things that I should be de-risking? That kind of thing. So yeah, I think more or less what you're saying, though. I mean, it's not I am. It's more I'm concerned that I might be dodging some of the things that I could be doing to de-risk it without lowering the ceiling on the vision, right?
Yeah, and so just to dig into that for a moment, like, what is telling you, like, you've got a concern about it. I'm assuming you're not. It's not coming out of nowhere. So like, what's giving you the sense like maybe I'm not doing enough on the de-risking side?
Probably that most of our days right now are spent completely dreaming and building and imagining and all that stuff, right? So there's virtually no time. I mean, again, we're 3 months in post team, right? But there's virtually no time spent with users, with possible users, building community, telling the world what we're doing, trying to do that kind of stuff. And again, it's not that I'm not aware that that's a really important thing and you can't do that too soon, but there's also like, I know you're into games too, right? Like, there's an element here of just uncertainty for me of like, no one part of serving the community that we want to serve with what we want to build is not trying to show them a half-baked, hard to understand concept and then saying, do you like it, so that we can feel good. And like, I suppose what I would say right now is we don't have enough that we could show to easily get real signal. And I wouldn't even say real signal. The way I think about it is I want to put something into the world that actually adds some value to the people that we think will be interested in this, which probably just means we've all been there. Like, you see a trailer or a video game or a piece of concept art and you're like, oh, can I swear on this thing, by the way?
Yeah, you can say whatever you like.
Yeah, and I go like, oh, that's fucking cool, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that's not a lot of value, but it's like what the value is in that as I think about myself when I see new stuff that I get excited about.
Yeah.
It's like there's something I'm really going to enjoy coming down the pipe.
Right. You're creating that anticipation. You've hooked into the imagination.
It's like thinking about Christmas in June, right? It's like there is some value that you can deliver to the people that we're building for, and I just want, and so I'm not avoiding it because I'm unaware of it. But there's certainly like an element of I don't want it to be purely a de-risking activity. That smacks of fear to me. And
right, like what you did with Automat. Yeah,
I want it to be value based, right? I want the things we put into the world. And I will say though, I have investors who would tell me, "Hey, Andy, you're a perfectionist, and what we like is that you're moving faster on this company." I've had one of my investors said that, which was a nice compliment and a nice, I think, shift and change. And so I definitely also don't want to fall into perfectionist category, right?
Sure.
So, but I want to balance our needs and desire, because it's not de-risking. It's making sure that we're building the thing that people actually want. And right now it's mostly building for ourselves. And the
Yeah.
question is really, at what point do we get out into the world and how do we do it? So de-risking, right away, I might almost change that. It's like,
Yeah, I was feeling that too.
yeah, it's not really a de-risk. It's more of a, how and when do we get out into the world? There will be a de-risking element to it. If people go, we don't care about this, or this
Right.
looks like crap, or this is dumb, well, that will certainly be helpful signal, right?
Yeah.
But it's more about not going into it through a de-risking lens, and more going into it with like, when and how should we go out in a way that is like real and authentic.
Yeah.
And to this community. It's a tricky community too, gamers, right?
Sure.
I'm one of them, so.
Okay, so what I heard from you, Andy, is that maybe we're changing the terms here. It's not about de-risking. It's about when and how do you go out to the community and show them what you've built so that you can get their input. Yeah?
Yeah, I think it's closer to that. I would say built implies a certain timeline. Like, I think if I'm feeling like I'm missing anything, it's how and when do you start going out to that community? I would say, how and when do we go out to the community with something that provides value to them first and foremost, even if it provides some, de-risking signal to us as like a secondary artifact. It's not just with with what we built, yes, because like concept art or videos or trailers is, I guess, what we built. But I just want to mean it's not. I think it would probably would be a miss if the first time we went out to community was with, here's a thing, go play it, right? And so I think we can do earlier than that, and it's just a question of figuring out when and how and why and where, all those questions.
Okay, so let's play with the question then, right? So there's some point in time in the future where you and the team will feel like, hey, we're ready to go and show this to some folks. And I want you just to imagine being in that situation. So now you're just stepping into that in the present moment. You're ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you see? What's in place there? How are you feeling about the product? What are you noticing? Like, what's coming up?
Well, and this is where I have a little bit of uncertainty, but what came up was this, right? The first thing was, and this is more or less our plan too, right? So right now, but but that's all malleable, was we actually should get something built. It should be the kind of thing that we can squint at and see through. So we're not going to build it to a level that doesn't require us to do a little bit of interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And we should be able to play that and go, this is fun and interesting, and not be bullshitty about it, right? And I actually think on that part, it's going to be like anything, you can fall in love with your own creations, but I think we're all, like, the whole team is like very discerning game.
You're really wanting to be honest about where you are and not really fool yourself. You used the word earlier, like, you don't want to be delusional.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. So I think, like, it's great to acknowledge what is cool. And we already had one of these things. Like, we actually built our first, like, 5-day prototype a couple weeks ago, and in anticipation of all getting together in the same room, because we're not in the same room most of the time, and doing sort of an internal play test. And like, it mostly disproved the thesis. It was mostly bad news, right? If you want to call that bad news. I mean, to me, that's great news. We spent 5 days and disproved something that in the old days I would have spent 2 months building. So I think that's great, right? But it definitely wasn't, oh, that definitely is fun. It was like, that's not fun. And so I think we're pretty good at being able to look at stuff and not need to tell ourselves the internal sales pitchy story. So I'm not too worried about that, actually, but I think it will get harder the more we build.
What are you worried about then?
Yeah, right. Good question. What am I worried about? I'm not worried. I know I just need to get to what I'm worried about, Brian, because I'm not worried about building. We're going to get something built. I'm not worried about there being something cool in it. I know there's going to be something cool in it that we're going to look at and go, that's wicked. I'm I suppose worried that I suppose I'm worried that it will be difficult to convey to people. Like, it's not a game. We're not building a game. We're not a game studio, right? Like the ambition behind Storycraft is really, and like, I believe this really deep. I don't want to make this a sales pitch, but it's like, I really believe that, like, from an, it's sort of that feeling you get with like Midjourney, you know, like when you use it or something and it's like, you go type some prompts. There's a new app my friends built called Remix, which is really good. I've been using that a lot. And it's like, and when you use it, it's like, you feel like you made something, right? It's sort of a cheat. Like, intellectually, you go aside for a second. You're like, this is a total cheat. I have this incredible image that I feel like I made, right? And it was like so easy. But that feeling of like creative expression and talent, like, you feel talented in a way, like, oh man, I'm like a concept artist now, right? Like, that feeling, I think, is like really material. And I think like, and that feeling is what we're after, but we're also, because it's a game like that you're bringing to life, it doesn't really have any meaning without other people in it. So there's also a social and community component to it. And so as I say this to you, it's like, the product feels complicated. It's not, here's a game set in a particular setting. It's
There's
like
something novel about it.
there's something very novel. Yeah, it's actually, there you go. That's actually partly what you're hitting, because it was the same thing with Automat, right? It was like, everybody knew chatbots for customer service. Nobody knew chatbots for sales. And we tried to do this new thing, right? I had this vision of the way the world could maybe and should work or whatever. And
there's the inventor in you, right?
The inventor, right? And so I think there's this element of, it's tricky to grok. It's tricky to comprehend without seeing it. And so I think that's what I'm worried about, is that we don't yet have a thing. We don't have a document. We don't have a trailer. We don't have a demo that clearly articulates to someone who shouldn't have to work that hard to understand what this thing is and why they might or might not want it. Like, that's the service that's what marketing, the service of marketing is basically telling someone, what is it and do I care about it, right? And it's like, so that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that we'll probably get a cool demo. The demo, if you play it for 5 or 10 minutes, will probably be very clear what it is and how it works, right?
Let me ask you a question, Andy. So when you're in that worry or in that fear that this won't land, people won't get it.
Yeah.
What do you end up doing? Like, how do you start to operate when you're coming from that place of fearing that people won't get it?
I think that's actually probably what leads to the de-risking instinct, right? I think that's why I came into this conversation thinking about it through de-risking as opposed to like offering value to people. I think we tend to start to go, okay, who is this audience? Where is this audience? How are we going to get to them? What's the message? Like, we get very tactical, which doesn't feel like totally wrong to me.
Sure.
Like, you have to do the work, right? But I suppose, you know how you share, like, I don't know, there's like that new creator movie coming out on Friday, and like, it's all AI, whatever, and it's like all my friends we're just sharing. Like, you see the trailer, like that kind of excited vibe of like, this is cool. We definitely want it. Like, we know this is for us, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's a part of me that wants to be that way about the product we're building. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the way that I would be if I had no fear. I would just be out there going, check out this fucking cool thing we built. I mean, and just see what would happen, right?
Right. The excitement is just kind of like pouring out of you, as opposed to having this sort of muted. I almost imagine there's like this, like, there's a marketing exercise you could go through.
Yeah, right.
Where you're like, what's our unique value proposition?
Yeah.
What's the specific niche that we're trying to focus in on? And what's the channel that we're going to reach them through?
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And all those things, I think, have their place.
Yeah.
But I almost, the way I hear it, there's this kind of, we're going to go through the exercise. There's almost a sterility to it.
Totally.
It's a clinical attitude around it versus like this kind of raw, enthusiastic, authentic energy that you were just describing that you can feel coming from the creator, coming and spreading among your friends.
Yeah.
And when you said, if I had no fear, that's how I would be showing up.
Yeah, probably something like, and yes, I mean, that's very much it, dude. Like, I suppose there's like a little bit of a lack of belief. Like, I'm also like, well, that's not me. Like, who is that? Like, who's that in the company? Right. Like, now we get into like some stuff, but it's like, you know, like, am I going to be out there on YouTube? Like, am I going to be a fucking Twitch guy? Like, what am I? Like, I am, but one thing I have zero, like, concerned with at all. Like I'm just like I am a dyed in the wool like hardcore fucking dork. Like I mean,
Great.
it's like comic books, video games. These are all like freaking weirdo like old school action figures. It's like
Yeah.
comics and like Frank Frazetta. It's like I'm just I'm surrounded. I bathe in it. It's the sea in which I live
Yeah.
culturally, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm as legit as it gets on that front. And so I feel like, you know, but I don't know. I suppose I have a little bit of doubt about my credibility as the founder CEO and like the voice of that. And that's where it gets sterile, right? Because it's like, then I'm like, okay, so I should hire somebody and I should get a marketing person. I should hire a community manager and I should do all this stuff that you quote should
So what?
do.
Hold on.
Yep.
Let's play with that. So you just spent a minute talking about all your bona fides
Yeah.
around being just a dyed-in-the-wool dork.
Yeah.
Like you live and breathe and eat this stuff.
Yeah.
And then you're going on to say, but wait, I don't know if I'm the guy to fully authentically represent this thing that we're building when it's made for people like me. So what, like reconcile that for me. Like, how is it that that's sort of like almost just what you grew up around, and then now you're afraid to kind of be the one who's representing it?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's partly it's so funny, man. It's like it's everything is always just there. But I suppose some part of it is like there's also that part of me that is like businessy and CEO-y and like serious and like not into that stuff. It's also the part of me that like people that know me well know me and see me in my entirety, right? But I think like, you know, I'm not sure which side comes across in that. So when I say and I don't, this isn't like a personal, I don't believe in myself like thing. It's not that kind of vibe. It's more a vibe of wanting to have the message be easily digestible by the people that we're building for, and make sure that the spokesperson of it, the messenger, is consistent with the message, right?
Sure.
And so I suppose there's just some doubt there. I mean, we did have a thing. We did talk with some of our advisors. Like we actually said, hey, we're probably building for a slightly older audience. We're not building for as old as I am. That's for sure. Like 18 to 35 is kind of the audience. Like after that, you're nothing. But I think there's like, but I think you know, you don't want to compete with Roblox and Minecraft. Like there's great UGC game environments out there, you know, and I think what we're building is for a lot of really good reasons, just tuned just a little bit more mature. And so on that front, maybe like I'm not too worried. I think maybe I could be the right person, but it's more that it's wanting the messenger to fit the message and just do the best possible version of the job for what it is that we're building. Yeah.
So let's come back to that. You sort of juxtapose like the sort of CEO-y manager, you know, kind of getting the details right, you know, let's get the job done in the right way. And then I almost heard like there's some part of you that has this kind of raw energy, right? And I don't see why you can't bring both of those in here.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably part of it. Like, I think I have two speeds, honestly. Like, the speed that I am with you on this call, where I'm like kind of sweary, kind of crass, but also like very dorky. Like, it's like, you know, it's not, that's me. Like, that is me. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, I suppose there is a little bit of fear about putting that out there. It's like pretty raw. Do you know what I mean? Because it's
can we touch that for a second?
Sure. Super uncomfortable to do this publicly, but let's go there.
So what's the fear around having that out in public?
Listen, I think it's like with a game playing like super dork audience. Like, I mean, it's like, you know, I put 100 hours into Baldur's Gate last month. You know what I mean? It's like the real deal. It's like, so I suppose there's many fears actually. The part that knows me as a CEO and like an entrepreneur and a guy that works his ass off and is like super dedicated to his companies and his team and all that kind of stuff would go like, whoa, wait a second, this guy's like a super dork, right? So
okay, so like, but what happens though? Like, so what's the if there's a fear, there's something that you're wanting not to not happen, right? So
Well,
what's the thing that happens if you are out there being like, hey guys, I just put 100 hours in Baldur's Gate, like.
I don't know. I mean, in all honesty, like, wouldn't you want someone that's building a games company to be really steeped in games? Like, I don't think anything happens intellectually.
I hear your intellectual mind coming online here, but what's the actual emotional component to it?
That people that have known me for a long time would go, wow, this guy's like spends a lot of time in video games and entertainment, and like this is not the profile of, you know, like a hard kick-ass CEO, right? Like that kind of thing. There's that whole side to being that type of media consumption type person, right?
Okay.
So it's definitely it's in there a little bit. Like I can think of specific people that if I went, like, let's say like I go start a podcast, that podcast is really talking about game genres through a lens that makes sense to our players and our users and story and all this kind of stuff, right? Like I would have a fucking blast doing that, right? Like, I mean, that's what I talk about with my friends anyway, right? That kind of stuff. So, you know, they're going that deep on something that niche, I suppose, has an element of okay, what does that have to do with badass entrepreneur, right? So there's definitely some of that there for sure.
Okay, so there's like a couple of identities here. One is being the badass, put together entrepreneur who can get shit done, and then there's other identity around being a super dork, a super geek, if you like, who loves to talk about this stuff all day, could spend, you know, hours upon hours talking about their builds and their stats and their whatever it is, right?
You love me some D&D.
Yeah, and so let's go back to this part where you let that gamer in you hang out in public for a bit.
Yeah.
It sounded like the fear is that there will be people out there who judge you, or maybe the people who know you as the CEO are like, "Oh, there's a side of Andy that like there's some judgment around." Is that a fair statement?
Maybe. I mean, people come to mind for sure. So it's like there's definitely, I think there's an element of that, right? For sure. I mean, listen, the other part of me, I know it's intellectual, but it's also true. And is like all of the success I've had, like becoming an entrepreneur, like building a company, like everything that has happened to me that's been good has been more about hanging myself out there, right? Like it really has been all that, you know? So I suppose it's partly intellectual, but it's also me just making sense of it. Like that has never not been rewarded. You know?
Great. I'm glad that you're in touch with the intellectual, rational part of you that can say, and they can reason out, actually, the evidence shows that when I am truly myself, that's been when I've been at my best. It's been when I've been successful.
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. So the mind is there. Okay. So what's so bad about being judged emotionally by people who maybe are seeing a side they don't know?
I mean, what goes on in my head is I've got just like an incredible ecosystem of people that it's almost shocking how much support I've had over the years. Do you know what I mean? Like incredible support. Yeah. And I suppose, like, it doesn't make sense, but I'm just leaning into it, right? Like I suppose what's there is that goes away or something, right? Like that people as people get to know you more, they see sides of you that maybe they don't relate to anymore, right? Like I think it's really that. Like I think that part of it, right? I mean, the other part of this is like, this is not a deep thing for me, but it's a thought, right? So it probably has some weight, which is like, I don't have kids. I'm not going to have kids, right? And so there's like an element of my life that is rooted in play and possibly, like, because I don't have kids, I get to do kiddish things, right? I have a lot more time that is my own than the parents in my life that I know, you know, and I think that's where I fit in a lot of this stuff. And so I think like it's more a question of relatability, especially as you get older, right? And it's like, you know, there's an element where there's some portions of my life that are actually legitimately different than some of my peers, right?
So what I hear in that, when I'm sort of tracking the theme, is something that goes like this: if I lean into this part of myself out in public, I'm going to be disconnected from others, because the people in my life who maybe have different life journeys and stages, they can't relate. All the support that I've received, I've been so grateful to receive, goes away. And so there is this, it's non-rational, but there is this sort of if this then that sort of thing
Mhm.
where it's like if I really am who I am,
Yeah.
then others will leave, others will disconnect. How's that landing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably part of it for sure.
What's the other part?
Well, yeah, I know what is the other part. Um, yeah, I mean, I think disconnect is the right word. I don't think people are going to go away. I don't think it's that black or white, but I think it's like that there will be a level of disconnectedness, you know, the other part of this that comes in is like I'm building it. I'll give you a very concrete example of someone that if they heard this would in no way, shape, or be offended. They would understand what I was saying. Like there's an element of like what I'm building, which is in video games. It's in this sort of storytelling, narrative, role playing sort of world, which is there's geeky and then there's geeky. I think our ambition is actually to bring that feeling of social, collaborative world building and storytelling, which I think is some of the best of humanity. It's like building companies. It's like being on a
Yeah.
sports team. It's like being in a crowd cheering for your favorite sports team, or being in the front row of a concert and you're with your friends, but the star lights on you for a second. It feels great. Like there's that
Yeah.
uniqueness while being together. There's like all that. There's real deep human emotions and feelings that we've been very thoughtful and deliberate about what we're building. But at the end of the day, it's a video game product, and I've literally had conversations with people about like, well, okay, but this is not really a thing that matters, right? Like compared to this other stuff, this is not going to be impactful to the world. Like it's great that you care about that, but this is not.
Okay, so there's someone out there being like, Andy, your life's work here, at least for this leg of your journey, doesn't really matter.
I'm using one particular example of a person that I know if he heard it would go like, oh, I understand what you're saying, but we've talked about it. We've even talked about it. And I've sort of
Sure.
said, I think like this is a person I can talk to and say, I think you're wrong. I think this is why this is impactful to the world.
Yeah.
I don't think stories and entertainment are an unimportant portion of like our human experience. I think they're pretty
Some would argue that
central.
they're core. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's how I feel about it. And but those things rattle around for sure. Do you know what I mean? And so it's disconnected, but it's also related to it's disconnected through the lens of this thing somehow being less important because it's in that realm.
Right. Okay, so the thing that's really interesting to me is like I actually notice there's almost an irony. So you talked about how Storycraft, if it really works, if this thing really achieves the vision that you've set out for it, it can create this incredible sense of connection,
Mhm.
of community, of togetherness, belonging, incredible storytelling, drama, the drama of human life in a sense, and everyone experiencing that together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the essence of what you're trying to build. And
Yeah.
there you are, Andy, who, again, down to his bones, like that is in the fabric of who he is.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
wow, wouldn't that be incredible? And yet for you to, or I should say, there's a part of you that's fearful that if you were to express that part of you, then it would lead into that disconnection.
So that unlocks something for me, right? So it's yes to all of that, but really what it is yes, like everything you just said. I believe that to my bones. I care about it. It's both video games, but also bigger than video games, right? And I suppose if you really it's funny, if you really locked into the core of like, if there is like a core seed of fear in there, it's because here's the real trick, Brian. Like, this is why I'm like here right now. Cause like somebody hears this is like helpful to somebody and it's helpful to me right now in the moment, but this company really is all of me. When I said I'm like technology, stories and games, like that's really true.
Yeah.
Right. Like outside of the people that I love in my life and the relationships, that has been the stuff that I am quite literally and figuratively surrounded by. It shaped me. Like I was a kid with his face in a book. I was a kid that had like an Atari and played every console up through the generations. Like it's been a big thing. And then technology has obviously been a big part of that, right?
Right.
And in fact, I would argue that, I read something from Neil Stephenson recently, like sci-fi and a love of that stuff often leads people into technology. So I think I am where I am, like this weird circular, snake eating its own tail kind of thing. And so this company really is a representation of me. Now, strangely, it's also very much a perfect representation of my co-founder, and I think some of the people in the company as well. So like there's other people there for whom this is just as personal. But for me, it really is. And I suppose if you really locked into the seed is I know how to go out there and talk about this, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just being like a geeky gamer on Twitch or YouTube talking about it. It's also seeded with all of these ideas around story and community and all this stuff. And so there's like a somewhat high-low element to it, which I also think is very, very me, right? It's like I love low culture and genre, but I also like love sort of like higher stuff, right? Whatever you in terms of art and books and all that stuff. And so, and I think I suppose if there's a core fear, just to spit it out, it's that nobody will care about that. And if they don't care about that, if that becomes too niche, if that's like too small and narrow, then what I'm here to make and build, because that is really like my life experience. Listen, nothing will crush me. Like nothing can really do that to me anymore. I think I've had like my first company really got me to a great place. Like it wouldn't mean anything. If somebody would care, maybe it just wouldn't. Like I'm not worried about no one caring. I am worried about enough people caring to have, a successful venture-backed business and to actually have to make the impact that I want to make on the world. But it's probably that. Maybe my interests and what I'm here to do and this thing ends up being like a little bit too small and niche, because it is so specific. That would be maybe the concern. And the de-risking would be, I'm certainly open to an idea. I'm not here to build my particular unique vision. I'm very open to the idea of saying, this is what I see. And other people's ideas glomming onto it, I think it would be perfect, actually. It shouldn't be this small, narrow vision of just my life or Adam, my co-founder's life. It should, and our experience, it should be an agglomeration of community. And so it's really how do we find the people that care and want to be part of it, right?
I think you just actually seized upon something really interesting that I want to expand on. And maybe that's what will take us toward the closing here.
Yep.
What I heard was, if I'm fully expressing myself here, will enough people care?
No.
Will enough people care enough to build a venture-backed, venture-scale company? But what you just said, I think, is really important to highlight, which is I have people around me that are co-creating this with me, and we will be hearing the feedback from our users and incorporating their ideas into this, such that this thing is not just me. Past a certain point, it becomes collectively something that we all are a part of.
Yeah.
And it starts to evolve beyond just who you are.
Yeah.
And so it's not, the job was never going to be, is it going to be enough for everyone when it's just my expression? It's actually, is my expression here going to be enough to kickstart the process where now others can add their own expression here?
Yeah, that's energizing. And in all honesty, it's so funny, man. It's like stuff you think you've sort of worked out is still there. Like what I actually think that is an expression of like taking too much responsibility, right?
Yeah.
It's not, which is like a very classic theme with you and I, right? And so it's like, of course this isn't all me. Like, and in fact, the beautiful part of it is right now, like everyone in the company shares this. We're small, we're like 5 people, right? But everyone shares that. Our advisors, share that. We've got some like Looney Tunes advisors that are just like gargantuan names, and like they're building a belief around this. So that's very freeing, actually. It's a good, because it doesn't come from a place like a solipsistic place of it's me. It comes from a place of responsibility, which I think my history has always been take. And I have verbiage around this now, which is like, I want to take all of the responsibility that is mine. I just don't want to take the responsibility that's not mine. That's been typically destructive, right? The whole like, there is nothing more destructive in terms of sayings in business, in my opinion, than like the buck stops with me, or like all that kind of shit. Like, yes, and like all these Elon stories and all that stuff. Like, again, I think possibly he may have taken the right amount of responsibility that he needed to take. I don't know. But the point is the meme that gets out there, the story that gets out there is like, you can never not take more. Like there's always more to take. And I think that actually is untrue. Like I think what you're saying is actually the successful path to the business actually is to recognize there's already a group of people for whom this is their dream. I like how you said it, the seed, right? For whom there is always a question in any company, like, is the seed enough to grow into a plant? For sure, this seed grows into a plant, right? The question is, does it grow into a big oak yet? I don't know. And you just don't know, right? But the point is, there's enough of us out there that we will see. And like, this is the whole point. Like I always say, like, companies are discovered, maybe grown is an interesting way. Like they are not forced into existence. That's another meme that you can just force. Like the world either wants this or it doesn't. Right. I know my team and I and the small group of people around us want it. Now the question is to go out there and it goes back to the original question, which is like, what do we need to do? And I think the thing I need to reflect on actually is like, okay, you are this thing, your team is this thing, you guys are credible and can talk about it. There either is a group of people that care about this and will respond to the way in which you want to communicate it and are able to communicate it, or they won't. And I think actually what is interesting is like, you know, between the people that are already in the company, everyone cares as much as I do. They will talk about it in different ways. And probably it makes sense for all of us to get a voice in that and see. Maybe somebody's voice resonates more. Maybe somebody's voice resonates more with some people and other people. So I think the point is we have to, my takeaway honestly is like, there's nothing preventing us from getting out there like tomorrow, to be totally honest, because like, it's this thing I said where you don't want to put you don't want to make them work too hard. Yeah. Like if it was a podcast where we were just talking and we weren't showing anything, probably a very small group of people can grok that and understand it and want to be part of it. And that's okay. For that moment in time, that's the group that might actually care about the weird conceptual ephemera that is the company at this point. Right. And, you know, in a month, we'll have something that we can show. And then, you know, 3 months after that, we'll have something that early people that want to try it can play. And so I think it's freeing ourselves of this worry that we're the right people or the wrong people. Like we're building it. We're clearly the right people. Like there's who's going to be better.
And you're starting this conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a back and forth in that conversation. And I'm reminded of this video. I don't know if you've seen this video. It's like this, I think it's like this grainy, vertical cell phone video of this guy just like dancing on a hill, by himself. And, he's just all by himself. There's music playing and he's just feeling himself. Right. And people are kind of walking by. It's in the middle of a park and they're kind of just like, you know, looking at him a little funny. Right. But he just keeps going. He is not paying attention at all.
Where everyone starts dancing around him.
Yes, exactly. And then someone comes in and joins him. Just now it's 2 people, and then it's 3 people, and then 4 people, and then all of a sudden people rush into frame, and they're all because this guy just started this dance party, and it's kind of what I was thinking about as I was hearing you reflect. Right.
That's really good.
This thing. Yeah.
That's really good, man, because that whole confidence thing, like that. It's a reminder, and this is a big part of the last company too, and like getting through all that was like, confidence is not this like blustery thing. It's like, it actually can be an act of service. Like when you actually believe it, like I actually do, right? Like, and like my co-founder and the team believes it. It's actually, selfish is the wrong word, but it's fearful to the point of not being of service. Like that person who did that dance, like they ultimately were in service to that whole hill having a way better time. And it was because they didn't make it about them and their concern and their fear and whatever. And so I think there's a good reminder in that, which is we really do believe. And so now the only not putting stuff out there and just seeing who else believes, but not through a lens of, do you believe us? But like, what do you want to see here is exactly what community is about, right? It's about having it be open. The guy didn't say you have to he didn't try and start a conga line, right? He said, let's just dance. You do what you want to do. Yeah. And I agree with you that the other thought that's going through my head is like the pathway to really like being big and being bold and doing all those things I talked about at the beginning is really to having those other people will absolutely release any of that like kind of like personal fear that you might have, right? Seeing people actually having fun and caring and like liking the thing is really going to matter.
Right.
And so that's actually very like, we're very motivated to get something out there, but that's like even a better like that drives like a weird personal motivation internal, like, hey, like the pathway to the other side here is actually to like go get it out into people's hands and find the people who are going to care about this, you know? So that's pretty that's a good thought.
Yeah. All right. I'm coming to a close here.
You did it again.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Andy. I'm excited then to see what you put out there, and just to watch you find the way to express yourself out there and however it makes sense for you.
You're on the playtest group, buddy. That's happening for sure.
All right. I'll look out for the email.
Exactly. All right.
Always a pleasure, Andy.
Yeah. Thanks,
See
man.
you.
Bye.
I believe early stage startups are essentially the creative expression of its founders. Late in our conversation, Andy said, "This company really is all of me." How many other founders can relate to that? And Andy's core fear of expressing himself is that not enough people will care about what he puts out in the world. Andy saw a shift when he turned expression from an exercise in validation into a conversation starter. He went from, "Do you believe us?" to, "What do you want to see here?" There's a big lesson here. Leadership gets hamstrung when it comes from a place of needing approval. It becomes powerful when it's an invitation for others to step into their authentic expression. Thank you for listening to Slow Down to Speed Up. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate it in your favorite podcasting app. If you are a founder who would like help in reaching the next level through coaching, or if you'd like to come on the show, please contact me at dashingleadership.com.